All right, and we're live.
hmm
Welcome, Felix. Welcome to Games Gathering.
Thank you.
And Felix is an experienced game developer. He's a solo developer of Polytopia. Oh, wait a second. Yeah. And he's going to tell us about the 7 things he learned about game design while making the Battle of Polytopia. So let's begin.
Yes. Hello. Thank you for the introduction. So yeah, my name is Felix, and I work for a company called Midjiwan. That's basically my own game development company. Uh, this is how I look on the internet, and I call myself Midjiwan. And I started my gaming career back in 2016 when I made this game called the Battle of Polytopia, and it's my first game, and it's also the only commercial game I made. So I've kept working on this game ever since it was released, and I also play it every day. And it is a turn-based strategy game, mainly for mobile, but it's also, during the years, we have released it on a lot of other platforms, like you can get it on Steam or Nintendo Switch, Android, iOS, and it's also available pre-installed in all Tesla cars. So today I'm going to be talking about some of the things I learned while I made this game when it comes to game design. And as I said, I don't have any formal training in game design. I'm self-taught. But when I made the Battle of Polytopia, I made it all by myself. So I had to do every aspect of the game creation myself. And it was a very interesting learning process. And I think game design is one of the parts that I feel that I have developed most while doing this game. So I would like to share some of these ideas. And I don't know, you guys out there, you probably work in games as well, and some of you are probably really talented game designers. So I just want to say that these are just things that I've come up with myself, and I haven't learned them anywhere. So maybe some of these stuff are just obvious knowledge to you. But I also notice that a lot of games out there, they don't use these principles, and I think a lot of games could become much better if they did. So I would love to share some of these thoughts here. So it's 7 game design principles that I learned. And the first one is reason to exist. And I think this is a very good thing to think about before you start a new game project. To make sure that this is a game that doesn't really already exist out there, and that it is a game that you want to play yourself. And this might sound obvious, of course, but I see a lot of people work on games that they don't actually enjoy playing themselves. They just hope that somebody else will like to play them. And I think that that's a very hard way to make games. So, and also a lot of people just work on practically on clones of other games. And I mean, it's okay to be inspired, of course, but I think you really need to bring something new to the table, something that doesn't really exist already. Otherwise, you could just like play the games that are out there, and you don't have to do all the hard work. So for me, it all started in this game. It's Civilization. I played this a lot when I was a kid, growing up, and it's my all-time favorite games. And when I grow old, and especially when I got my first like iPhone, I really felt the urge that I wanted to play these Civilization games again and have this kind of experience. But I couldn't find anything on my phone that was similar to this. And I looked around a lot. And then after a while, I decided that, okay, I have to make it myself. And to make a game like Civilization work on a phone means you really have to work on it and make sure that it's suitable to play on a phone, because you can't just port whatever is there. People have tried that and it doesn't really work. So that was my reason for existence, was that I really needed to play this game myself, and so I had to create it myself. So that was my driving force to make the game that I really wanted to play myself, but I couldn't find it. And for me, that was a big success, because I managed to make a game that I found very fun to play myself, and I still play it till this day, almost 8 years after release. And I think if you manage to make a game that you like yourself, and you are not a super strange person, there's going to be a lot of other people who feel like you. So, and I also had that luck that I wasn't too strange. So there was a lot of other people who also enjoyed this game. And here's a second principle I want to talk about. I call it smart and pretty. And that's a kind of, I try to work from this idea that a game should be like smart enough, like the game logic should be compelling enough to be able to be played without graphics at all, just with simple wireframes. It should still be interesting and trigger your mind. And the game should also be so pretty, and the UI should be so delightful that you want to like interact with it, even if you remove the logic. And if you manage to make those two parts excel on their own and then combine them, I think you will get a very nice experience. So when I developed Polytopia, I started out with trying to make the logic of the game fun to play, even though it looked something like this with just super simple wireframe graphics. And if the game design works well enough, this is gonna like trigger your creative thinking or your strategic thinking in a way that makes you want to play it. And then I separately created a world that I find very beautiful. And for me, sometimes when I play Polytopia and it looks like this, I kind of make weird decisions just because I like how this world looks, and I can picture myself being one of these people living in this little village and so on. And I think maybe we need to build a road so they could get out to this beautiful beaches there on the little island, even though you don't need it strategically in the game. So in Polytopia, I really enjoyed to put a lot of detail, a lot of effort into making the visuals pleasant. And yeah, and combined with each other, I think it creates a good game. And the third principle, which I think might be one of the most useful ideas, it can be applied to almost everything in the game, in game design. It's something I call temptation and desire. And it is basically about making sure that the player needs something before you give it to them. And a lot of games I play, you get handed a lot of things, like you get stars and gems and piles of gold and all these kind of different weapons and magic before you need them. It's like you're just throwing stuff at you and your inventory gets full and you don't know what to do with all this stuff. And that's very annoying, I think, in games. I really believe that you should first be presented with a problem, and you feel that you really want to solve this problem, and then you find the solution to that problem. And I have a little fake game here to illustrate this. So imagine this little indie game here, some kind of dungeon crawler, I guess. So you enter a room. This is an example, though. The first example is how I don't think it should be. So you enter a room and you find a key. And you're like, okay, I pick up the key. It's probably good to have in the future. And you progress to the next room and you find a locked door. And you're like, oh, hey, I can use the key to unlock the door. And you finish the level. So that's kind of a basic setup for a game, right? But I would really suggest doing it the opposite way, like this. You enter a dungeon and you find a locked door, and you start thinking, like, I really want to get into that locked door. I wish I had a key, for example, but I don't. And then you notice the little open door to the right, and you go in there and you find the key, and you become really happy. Like, you really feel that you're on your way to solving this mystery. And then you go back into the room and you use the key to open the door and you finish a level. So these are two games that have exact same properties, objects. We just switch the order of them, and it becomes much more interesting for the user, and it sparks a lot more positive emotions, because you get happy when you find the key, because you know what you're going to do with it. And you feel that you actually solved the problem instead of the game just solving it for you in a linear way. And in Polytopia, I try to apply this as much as possible. For example, when you start a new game of Polytopia, we have our little capital in the desert here. And the one big part of the game is that you want to upgrade your cities by using resources on the map. So here you see that we have little cactus growing in the desert. And if you tap them, it will say that you need to research organization to extract this resource. So you need to learn something in order to use this resource to upgrade your city. So you're presented with a problem here. And the solution is that you open your tech tree and you see that you can learn organization here to the right with a little cactus. So you spend some of your stars to learn organization, and then you can harvest these resources and become happy. And once you learn how to harvest these cactus, you might notice that a new resource has spawned on the map, these little grass things. And that's something that you can turn into a farm by researching yet another technology. So I also I introduce new resources to the game when you are closer to be able to use them. So I don't present everything at once, just the things that you should focus on. So I present one problem to the player, and the player can solve that, and then it progresses, so it doesn't become overwhelming. And this is another one that I think is a very, very good principle that you can apply to almost everything in game design. And it's challenging choices. It's basically about making sure that every choice that the player makes in the game should be hard. Not because there are too many things to choose between. I think it's good to have like 2 or 3 things you can choose between, but they should be almost equally good. So it's really, really like a challenge to decide, should I do this or should I do that? And it should affect the games in different ways, because that really triggers that strategic thinking, and you feel that it matters what you choose. So make sure that there are no like obvious choices. And in Polytopia, once again, an example of this is, here's another starting situation now with a different tribe. These are the Barder Vikings. They start out in this snowy lands. And here you can choose to either go hunt these little baryons that live in the forests and upgrade your city and grow your economy that way. Or you can decide to spend your stars, your currency, on training a warrior that could go out and explore the forest and find other villages and grow your empire. So these are 2 very different starting strategies that you can have. Either like upgrade your capital, build a strong economy, or train warrior units and expand into new territories and make your kingdom larger. So that is a hard choice, and it really affects the rest of the game, what you choose on your first turn. And when you upgrade a city, in Polytopia, you always will be presented by something like this, where you can choose between two rewards, and the rewards will be different depending on the size of the city. But this is also something like, in this example, you can either get a bunch of resources, stars that you can spend on other stuff, or you get a city wall, so you get a lot better protection of your city. And this is also like should always be a hard choice. And if you don't pick your city wall in this instance, you will never be able to get a city wall in this city again. So this is a very definitive choice that you can make. And I find this very fun when I play, because it gets you thinking like what I'm going to choose all the time. And it's really like triggers your brain to try to solve these problems. And then I have the fifth principle is something I call maximize happiness. And it's about, I noticed that you don't really need to be mean to the player when you make a game. Like in this, when I started out making Polytopia, there were a lot of situations. I can show an example here. In Polytopia, we have old ruins spawned across the map, and if you go there, you can examine them, and you get different kind of stuff from it. You can find resources or old scrolls containing technologies or some unit that will help you or something. And in the beginning, I did as many other games do. I also added a few bad options. So if you explore the ruin, it could collapse and kill your unit, or you could like release a monster or something like that. But I noticed that when that happened, I just got sad, you know? And I think this is something that has changed. When I was a kid growing up in the 80s, like all games, they were just filled with punishments, and like there were so many bad things happening in games. And I think nowadays games are much more focused on positive experiences, and that makes games much more addictive, I think, and fun, because you get rewarded all the time instead of getting punished. And I think if you want the players to be happy and really enjoy the game, I think just try to avoid punishing them instead. But I mean, you still want to have this dynamic of different options or different things that can happen to make the game feel interesting and alive. But it doesn't have to go from bad to good. It could instead, like this. This is a regular chart going from bad to good. It could instead go from pretty good to really, really amazing good. So you still have the same dynamic, but you're not punishing your players, and that makes them happier, while still keeping this kind of random element. And the sixth principle is, might not feel like game design, but I think it's related anyway. It's something I call informative art. And that is basically making sure that the art assets of your game truly represent the properties of the objects in the game. So if, for example, if something is poisonous, it should look poisonous. If something is positive, it should look positive, and negative, and so on. So that the player can just look at an object and understand how they should interact with it. If they should avoid it, or if they should, reach for it, or so on. And in Polytopia, I've been working a lot when we are making the art assets to make sure that they are doing this. And I just have a few examples. This is from the Sumanti tribe. It's like an insect tribe that we have in the game. And here they have two different insects. And the insect on the right is the hexapod. It's very quick. It can move around effortlessly on any terrain, but it's very easy to kill. It doesn't have any defense at all. So we try to show that by making it really small with very long legs and no basic protection at all. And the one to the left is the is the Keton, and that has a lot of defense. And we show that by giving it a very hard and big shell, and it also has these poisonous spikes on the back. And that is because it is poisonous. So if you try to attack it, you will get poisoned. You get stung by these thorns. So we're really trying to tell the player what is going to happen if you interact with these two insects in different ways. So, I mean, of course, you can read the stats on units in games, but you also need to just be able to look at the screen and understand what's good, what's bad, how can you interact with these objects. And here's another example. This is how a city looks when it upgrades and becomes bigger and bigger. And in Polytopia, it's a very, very big difference between a big and powerful city and a tiny little village. And it's also because it is a big difference in the game. And we made sure to make that very, very visible. And the last example, this is a unit that grows. It's a dragon from the Illyrian tribe. It starts out as a little egg that can't do anything. And after a few turns, it will hatch into a mini dragon that can fly around and bite people with those little teeth. And after a few more turns, it will turn into this fire dragon that could shoot fireballs at people and burn down villages and so on. And it's like one of the most mighty units in the whole game. And we were really, it's really important to show the difference between these three units, these three stages of the same units, with using the size of the units and also like how many teeth they have and so on. All right, and then I have the seventh and last principle I want to talk about, and it's about reduction, reducing to the essence. And that is just the thought, something that it's a tool that I used a lot when making Polytopia, and it's just about removing as much as you can and just see what happens. Because I noticed that the more I removed of features of stuff, the better the game became. And that's really the process I used when I turned Civilization. This is a screenshot of a later version of Civilization. And I wanted to turn this into like a good mobile game experience. And also during this process, the game changed a lot. I mean, Polytopia is not a carbon copy of Civilization. It's just we started out in the same space, and I think there's a lot of things that are different between Polytopia and Civilization. And that happened during this reduction process. So I started trying to like peel away different layers of things that were in this game. And I kind of experimented with how much can I remove and still keep the game fun and interesting. And sometimes you remove something and you notice that, okay, now the game broke. So this is important, like put it back and just keep it there. But a lot of things can be simplified. Some things can be combined into one feature. Some things can be removed. Some things can be simplified. And I did this over a long period of time, and I tried a lot of different things. And finally, I came to a situation when I turned this game of Civilization into this game of Polytopia. And to me, this is a much more interesting playing experience because I can actually see what's going on the screen. It is simple enough to like fit in my brain. I can make these like calculated decisions, and when I look at the map, my brain starts like generating strategies because it's much more easy to see what's going on, and there are not too many numbers to keep track of. And I think this is also a process that I'm trying to apply all the time, since we're constantly working on improving and upgrading this game. We're adding features that are important, but every time we add a feature, I spend a lot of time reducing that feature before we release it to the public. So doing the same thing over again, just trying to peel off, combine, simplify as much as you can. And when there's nothing left to remove, then it's usually in its best state. So I try to keep it minimal. And that's everything I have to say. And I really would like to answer, if you have any questions, please type them in the chat. And I can answer some of these questions later or right now.
Yeah, thank you very much for your lecture. We already have a couple of questions. One is, I've always liked your city mechanics. Why are city locations pre-selected on the map? What led to this decision?
Well, that's a good question. Well, that's one of the main differences between Civilization and Polytopia is, in Civilization, you build settlers and you go out to find a city location instead. I don't remember exactly, but I think I was actually inspired by some other game. I don't remember what it was, that I think had some pretty good fighting mechanics. And they instead had bases that you had to capture. And I think that makes it quite fun, because like quite early in the Polytopia game, you start fighting about these little villages with your opponents. And so if you have a little village like that you want to capture, it becomes a strategic view instantly, and the game like starts getting competitive a lot quicker, instead of building a settler and going somewhere and founding a city. So I think it's because also Polytopia is a shorter and more condensed game than a Civilization experience that might be more of a like a slow role-playing experience. So I hope that answered the question.
Thank you. The next question is, I guess this is related to your silence point about simplification. And the question is, with your approach, we eliminate as much friction as possible. What is good friction, in your opinion? I'm not sure if it's related to the silent point. It was just asked at that time.
Mm-hmm. Can you say it again? I didn't hear the question, really.
Yeah, so the question is, with your approach, we eliminate as much friction as possible. What is a good amount of friction, in your opinion?
I think it sounds like maybe that the question is more related to this idea about maximizing happiness. If it's about removing friction to the game. And I think, there will be a natural friction in any game, especially if you have opponents. And the friction in Polytopia can be that, like, the friction could be like, how good can it get, instead of, am I going to make this at all? So there's always a challenge, like, of trying to maximize, even if every option out there is good. It's like, okay, what is the best, which order is best to do all these good things? Instead of having to worry about bad things happening, you could just try to optimize the result of all the good things. And it's still going to be equally challenging, or even more, because you have more like agency. You can decide more about what's going on, instead of being like just haunted by random plages.
Thanks. Yeah, I think your answer was right. And next question is, what's your favorite part of Civilization?
Well, I really like the beginning, and I remember it was a while since I played Civilization a lot, but I really liked the beginning, like this idea of being able to start from scratch, and the world is still beautiful, and it's nature, and it's like Stone Age kind of thing, and you go out with your, like, exploring the world and settling new cities. And and that's a very nice experience. And like when you play a game of Civilization, it's usually quite a long experience, and I think like the last 60-70% of the game is just hard work. It's not fun anymore. You just have to like move around your units, and the world is broken, and you have pollution and shit. And I mean that's probably a kind of like a satire of how reality is, and that everybody just wants to go back to the forest, to the Stone Age in some way. So I always feel like, oh, I don't want to play this anymore. I just want to start from scratch again. So that's something I like about Civilization.
Thanks. And the last question is, what are your plans for the future? What are you working on right now, if it's not a secret?
Well, I have a lot of. It's interesting that it's possible to work on one game for so long, and now we're also like a team. We are 5 people here in the office working on the game every day, and there's still things to do all the time, and I have ideas of things that I can improve and so on. But at some point I would like to make another game as well, but we'll see when that day comes. And so yeah, we have a lot of fun stuff planned for the next year, so there will be some interesting updates, definitely. I can't, it's actually a bit secret, it is.
Okay, thanks. Do you have any last words to finish?
No, I'm just happy to be able to talk to you. Sad I can't see anyone because there is no live audience at the moment, but I'm really impressed that you're doing this conference during the circumstances. And maybe if you don't know, I also want to let you know that all the money that we earn from Russia or Ukraine, we are donating directly to the Red Cross in Ukraine to help people who are suffering from the war.
Thank you very much, Felix. Thank you for your donations and for your lecture, of course.